Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Midweek Program at the J.C. Raulston Arboretum. My name is Blake, and I'm the Education Assistant here at the Arboretum. And today we are in the Laugh House because we've got quite a few gardening tasks on the table here in the Laugh House. Today on our program, we're going to be covering October gardening tasks. We've got our Director of Horticulture, Paige, as well as our Research Technician, Tim Alderton, who are going to go through some things you may be doing in the garden this time of year. Okie dokie. And with the announcements out of the way, I think we can pass things over to Greg and Tim to show us what we're doing in the garden this month.
Hey, y'all. So it is October, contrary to popular belief, and the temperatures.
Nice today.
Nice today. A good day to be outside with plants. And there's not like a standard of things that we're doing every season kind of at the same time. There's some general things. So we always kind of have to put our heads together and figure out, well, what are we going to talk about this Wednesday? And if you're challenged in keeping track of all these things like I am, it's helpful to have help from all parts and people involved with that. So we thought of some things today that are kind of going on in the garden. We're getting into fall. We may not have those cool temperatures yet, but there's a lot of things that...
Next week.
Yeah, next week they're coming. There's a lot of things that you can be doing right now. And we're going to go through several different things. We've got things all lined up behind us here. We chose the Laugh House because this is a good place to get out of the direct sun. There's a lot of fall going on in here. I'm looking at a Triceratops over here that's covered and shimmering with bees right now. And that's always a sign that it's fall whenever I see that flowering. So one of the things that's really important for us and for a lot of gardeners is planting. So, the most important thing is this is one of the best times of the year to plant because things are dormant and plants are still going to be growing their root systems and doing things. So this is a good time of the year to start that venue of planting. Because it's a little bit warm right now, watering is going to be important and also mulching. So I have all parts and pieces of that behind me. And if you're ready, I'm going to jump over and demonstrate. We've got a small something in the Ericaceous family. I think it's a mountain laurel that we're going to plant here in the protection of the Laugh House. Now, if you spend as much money on manicures as I do, it's important to wear gloves. And these are we've done favorite tools and talked about our favorite gardening items. I think when Sophia and I did one of these a while back. These are definitely them for me. The nitrile dipped cotton gloves keeps your dexterity and keeps your cuticles looking fabulous. So this is going to be the exception to the rule. I just stuck this shovel in the ground, and with very little effort, it went all the way in, which is lovely. So lots of organic matter here. So what we've got is a container-grown mountain laurel, and hasn't been in the pot real long, so I'm not anticipating any girdling roots. But let's take a look and see what we have. And yes, small fibrous roots. It's not really messy, hasn't been in this pot too long. I don't think it's been potted up not too far in its past. So that's a good sign. We're not going to have to rip this root system up. So I'll rough this up just a little bit. And if you remember from talks I've done in the past, the reason we do that is we want these roots to go out into that plant's new root zone and in that hole. So because there aren't a lot on the root ball here, I'm just going to lightly rough that up. And if you can get a close-up of that, you can see the roots are starting to come through there already. So I think that's plenty for this particular plant. I'm not going to have to go real deep because there isn't a lot of root ball there. So luckily for me, nice loose sandy soil in here.
Yeah, this one's not real soil out here. I hate to say it.
No.
We have more or less a rooftop blend.
Yep.
In here. It's a largely permatil fines with some compost in it. So it's really easy to dig in.
Easy to dig. It'll be good drainage. This mountain laurel should be happy. So something I always get asked too is, what direction do you want this to plant? Well, not many people are going to see it from this vantage point, and it's got kind of a flat spot here on this side. And what I like to do is just sit it in there and kind of look and see where it looks the best. And I think that's going to be the spot right there because this is where it's going to be seen the most, and it's got room to kind of come back this way. So I'm going to take a little bit out. You don't want to plant too deep because you don't want the root collar of the shrub or the tree to be below soil level. That causes lots of cultural problems. If it gets wet, that area of the plant is very sensitive, so you want to be sure. It's always better to err on the side of being too high. And with this loose soil, I'm gonna put a little bit of more soil back in the hole here and err on the side of caution and plant this just a little bit higher, I think. So I'm just pulling that soil around the hole up against the pot, the root ball, and you don't want to stomp that with your foot and compact that. You want those roots to go into that loose soil very well. And at this point, it's not a bad point in planting to water in. If you water that in, the soil is going to drop down a little bit more and you can pull soil back around. But I think with this particular area, since it's sandy, I'm not going to have to worry about air pockets, which can happen in kind of heavier soil. So I've got that at a good level. And the most important thing after planting is mulching with some good organic matter. We're very lucky here to have leaf compost on site. And again, I've said many times before, 2 to 3 inches is more than enough. And don't have that mulch up against the root flare or the collar of that plant. You don't want it to get moist and cause that plant any undue stress. And that's it, quick and simple. A couple thousand more of these and we'll feel a little more comfortable here. We're gonna be starting this around the Arboretum in the not too distant future. So look for signs of some new things planted. And I'll water this in heavy before we leave today. We'll get it mapped and in our database and all that stuff, and then we'll be good to go.
Okay. So I get to do the next project here, and this is something we don't do often here in the Arboretum, and it's work with greens. But this is a wonderful time to be planting your cool season vegetables. We do a little bit out at our yurt where we have the programs for the children and youth. And so we do have some on stock right now. The same thing can be done with a lot of the ornamental greens as well, and pansies. This is a wonderful time of the year to get them in the ground. Perfect time. The stores are gonna, that is the nurseries, and I hate to say it, the box stores are also gonna have pansies, probably snapdragons, delphiniums for us here. We can't grow them in the summer, but we can grow them through the winter months and they will flower in the spring. This is a wonderful time to be planting all those things. So I just brought this tray of, I think was seeded just a couple weeks ago, probably. Let's see, actually about a little over a month ago. The end of September, the end of August, this was actually sown. So it's about a month and a week old at this point. But these are some blends of kale and some other brassicas or cabbage relatives. It looks like some bok choy or something in here in this blend. But what I like about these is these are almost as ornamental as they are edible for us. So these we can sometimes get away with planting in the Arboretum as an ornamental. Though they are annuals, they are great to put in at this time of the year and will do perfectly fine through our winter months here. And whether you're growing it as an ornamental or as an edible, they are useful in our landscapes here. So, like I said, pansies were another one you get, but sometimes you can find, this is not the typical one, but you'll find artichokes or cardoons that are available to plant. And these, this is a perennial for us. And this is one we were moving from another bed that we dug up about 3 weeks ago. And has already resprouted. It was dormant through the summer months, just pushing up in mid-September. This is Cynara syriaca, which is probably one of the wild parents of the artichoke. This one's a little bit meaner than the typical artichoke and has spines all over it, and it's painful. But in the winter, this will come up as long as it's not terribly cold. If we give it a big cold spell and go down much below 20, it may die back some, but then it'll sprout back up in the next warm spell we have. You know how we have those here in central and eastern North Carolina throughout the entire winter months. But makes a wonderful statement in the landscape through the winter months, and then it grows rapidly in the spring, and you'll get a big flower stalks, thistles that are about anywhere from 4 to 6 feet tall, sometimes even 7 or 8. But the clumps of these will get quite large, and they're impressive to plant among with pansies around them, or the kales and other greens for some structural interest through the winter months. And it's like I said, a perfect time to do these. This is, like I said, this was dormant when I potted it up out of the garden to move, and I planted some of its friends already in another location. This, I think, is going to be in the perennial border as soon as I get a day or two to get back in there. So wonderful time to be doing those. So, and I don't know, do you want to do the bulbs now?
Sure.
And then we can bounce back and forth.
Yep. So there's always a lot of time and well spent looking and perusing garden catalogs. I'm not promoting anybody. Brent and Becky's are a perennial favorite of ours. We all know them, and they've been friends for a number of years. Great website, great catalog, but now's the time that you want to order because everybody's going to be ordering pretty soon. I just moved into a new house, and that was one of the first things on my list to do was to get the catalogs out and start perusing for bulbs that I want. And most of them have really good pictures, lots of ideas you can get, color schemes and all that sort of stuff. But they're going to be coming fast and furious really, really soon. We like all different types of bulbs here. I personally like some of the species tulips. We were talking about those earlier. I like a lot of the minor bulbs, crocuses and things like that. Doug Ruin got me really interested in snowdrops. Those are some of my favorites. I actually have some in my garden in Charlotte that he gave me many, many years ago. Those are probably going to get dug up and brought to my garden here. So it's that time of the year, folks. Get your catalogs out and dust it off and make your list. Check them twice and order from your favorite bulb carrier. And
I have a little project here. So many of us have hellebores in our landscapes, and the Hellebor hybridus, which are the most common ones now, they're almost weedy, but this is not one of them. This is one of the other species. This is one of the Christmas roses, the Hellebor Niger, though this selection, this wild collected form, does not flower that early. This one flowers actually in February and March instead of December and January, but it's a later form of Hellebor Niger. We don't often get seed set on them, and I noticed that there was a beautiful clump of seedlings here, which is uncharacteristic for Niger for us here. And this is a perfect time to get in here and tease out these, and you can either I wouldn't pot them, but if you have them, you can get them out. You can put them into space them out, because these are in like too thick of a patch here. Or you can move them to other parts of the garden, share them with friends.
Share them with friends.
But this is a little bit more special than some of them. It's not one of the modern hybrids that complex hybrids that include Niger that are sterile. But so this one does make a few, but this is just one I saw today, and the hellebores are coming out of dormancy now. They just kind of sit there through the summer months, and then they perk up in the fall when it cools off, and they're active at this time of the year. So this is a wonderful time. This little seedling that I shifted over here will root in very well, very quickly, with the lower soil temperatures and nighttime temperatures now, and get a vigorous growth. And these take a couple, 2 to 3 years at least, to even think about flowering. So the sooner you get in here and at this time of the year, you're not hurting them. They respond very well to the transplant. If you do it at other times of the year in the late spring, when you think about doing digging up of perennials and dividing them, they might not like that so much. This one is wonderful to do now. So that's another little project that I found here in this location. And there's 20 or 30 seedlings right here. And like I said, I just noticed those a little while ago.
The more you look, the more you see.
Yes. But this is the wild type, and it pure white flower fades to pink, and it typically is in blossom for us. This one is in mid to late February and then into March. So it's, like I said, a little bit later than the typical Christmas rose. It tries to be a Lenten rose. So another project that I have at this time of the year, and I don't know if, to me, this is one of our caladiums, and I've thinned our caladium collection a lot. I didn't get them planted this year, but there's a few that I really like, and this is one of them. This is Burning Hearts, and it's starting to say that we're having cool nights already. And with the impending 40-degree nights that we're having over the weekend, this is really gonna start to shut down and say, I wanna go to bed. And I'm not gonna show my face again until, June. So, I'm thinking about these. This is a container grown one, so it's pretty easy, but I have some in the white garden, for instance. If I wait too long, I will misplace them and not be able to find them. So in the next 3 weeks, probably, I will be getting in there and digging them out and drying them off through the winter months. And I've showed you other years how to do that. It's really simple. You can throw them in a paper bag, and you store caladiums warm, not like you do your typical other bulbs like narcissus and stuff, or you want them to be in the 60 to 65 degree range, and they'll even take warmer than that through the winter months, and they store perfectly happy at that. So they're an exception to the rule on a lot of them. But this is one I don't want to lose. So like I said, I'm thinking about this one, but this is one that's in a container too. The other way you can do it if it's containerized caladium is you can just dry the container off and put it in a warm spot through the winter months, which is an easy way of doing it too. But you want to probably refresh the media that it's growing in during the spring and fertilize it just to keep up the vigor on them if you do that. And then, I don't know, let's see, I have one more little project that you might think about. This is a salvia that I found in the garden. It's a pinker purple than we have of any other ones. This is a seedling that popped up next to one we have. It's called Salvia Rock and Deep Purple. I think it's deep purple and not dark purple. But anyways, but this is a color we don't have represented by this type of salvia. And it was just a seedling. The bees took care of it and did the cross for us. And it's, I want to see what I can do with this. So I want to get some cuttings of these in the next couple weeks. And I have the plant over there. And this is just a reminder for that. It's a great time to collect some cuttings of some of the plants that you have that you want to save and keep through for another year, or to multiply and see how they do. And that's what I want to do with this one, is to see what it does in another situation next year. So it's not next to its parent plant. I want to see it out so it can grow out on its own and see what happens, and see if this is one that might be worth us introducing in the future. And I'm really liking it. We have some other salvias on the same line, but they aren't the same color, and they aren't, so far, don't look to be the same structure that this one has had. So I really want to grow some of this out. So you can do that with your favorite tender perennials, or some of your perennials that you just want to bulk up and have a few more for next season. And you have a little windowsill that you can overwinter them on and play around with them. So that's one I'm going to be doing in the greenhouse this winter here. But I just wanted to use that as a reminder for that. So there may be something else that you want to take cuttings of, your a favorite coleus. This is a perfect time for that. So just another thing there. So do we have questions?
Yes.
Yes, we do. Okay, this one was right out of the gate from Marilyn, and it's actually kind of related to the plant giveaway. She was asking, what color is the flower of the Mrs. Robinson Hardy Mum?
That is kind of a dark burgundy red, I guess you'd say, or a brick red. And if I remember right, I think it's a button type.
Yeah.
It's one Doug brought in, and it's been a really good bloomer. And it's probably about an 18 to 24 inch tall growing one too.
Real tight flower.
Yes, it's a little button. So yes.
Awesome. Yeah, because she says Dr. Google couldn't.
Yeah, I can't find anything on that one either. So I don't know if it's one that Doug got from Mrs. Robinson or what, because sometimes he did have things like that. So
sure.
With a history, but we don't know the history yet.
Okay. So somebody's asking, speaking of planting, how about unplanting? I have a brugmansia that is so gorgeous and I want to overwinter it. I plan to dig it out and put it in a pot in my garage. How much of a root system do I need, and what should the composition of the media be?
So where do they live?
Oh, geez.
If they're around here, I wouldn't dig it.
No kidding?
They can survive outdoors.
Yeah, around here.
And if it's not too terribly big, you get to that point where it's going to dip really cold, you can protect it in the short term with some kind of a fabric or something. I had, when I worked at the Biltmore Estate in the mountains, they weren't hardy outside. So thinking along the same lines of the caladiums, you can start to plan and think to how are you going to stage and bring that stuff inside. But you can cut it back pretty hard. You can knock a lot of the soil off of it because it's not going to be actively growing. Put it in a pot, make sure it's watered in before you put it to bed. And there isn't much more you really need to do.
And another thing you can do with brugmansias are you can take stem cuttings, very large stem cuttings, and they will overwinter in like a bucket of water, in a corner, in an above freezing area, or even wrapped in barely damp paper towel or buried in a flat. They root so easily. And that's another way of doing it. You can multiply them that way, either way. And just as some insurance, but you have to get them before we have a cold spell, much into the mid to upper 20s. The tissue will get damaged above ground, and I've waited too long a couple times. I can say
now's a good time to plan and think
about that. So yeah.
Okie dokie. So the next question's really sort of about the nature of the midweek program. Rick's asking, are you going to be looking at the plant trials now that the season has given more maturity? And we talked about it a little bit. We thought about the idea of doing a revisit of the plant trials, but ultimately
we did talk about that. I don't know. That's not a bad idea. That has become a favorite spot in the garden for me because of that, because of Bernadette's enthusiasm and kind of seeing it through her eyes. But that's a good suggestion. That's something we definitely will revisit and see if we can get it on the.
Yeah, for sure. I may get in touch with Bernadette, and we might try and
we have to do it in the next couple weeks.
Yeah, like a pre-recorded something or another, maybe just to share with you all at some point. We'll get back to you, Rick. We'll let you know about that.
It will be good to follow up on that.
Or if nothing else, for next year, we can plan on doing such a thing.
Yeah, no kidding.
So in the long term.
He did have a follow-up comment where he says, my favorite programs are the ones where we focus on plants at different seasons, and he'd like to see more programs on unusual plants. Well, Rick, let me tell you something. We're starting to cycle through these gardening tasks for the month, so we decided we wanted to, rejuvenate the program a little bit. So starting in January, instead of Gardening 101, we're going to be doing top plant picks, where we're just going to go find whatever plants are in the garden are looking good at that time of year, and we will tell you about them. And so that will be that in a nutshell, looking at unusual plants that look good at the times of the year that they look good. So you'll get a little flavor of that when we come to January. So look forward to that, everybody. Okie dokie. So somebody's asking about specifically the container of the carnivorous plants that our intern Sarah did. How are we going to overwinter that one here?
That one, I may leave it out until we have some fairly decently cool weather. There is a Drosera capensis in there, which I don't know how hardy that one is. It's one of the South African species of sundew. So that's one that we may, if we wanted to keep it alive, we may have to bring it into a little bit warmer condition. Just a cool greenhouse would be ideal, but above freezing. But the Sarracenias would be fine. There's also a Hymenocallis in that container, which I don't know how hardy the species is to be out in a container above ground. And it would also might benefit the container that it doesn't freeze, because we do not have holes in the bottom of that. So it's kind of like a little pond, and water expands and goes. Yeah, and it will destroy the container if we don't watch out. So we'll probably bring that one in maybe in mid to late December, unless we see that there's some other cold spell coming before that, so that we have it done before the holidays, in case we have an occurrence like last year when we went down to 9 degrees.
Let's not talk about that.
Yes, in a matter of minutes, or actually hours, and I wasn't here. I didn't have to worry about it. I was where it was -9 instead. But anyways, so yeah, so that we might bring. I'd say we're going to bring that one in for the winter months.
Yes.
For sure. And what you just said about that just reminded me that 9 degrees this past winter, that happened when we had like a whole bunch of rain right before it. And
You did?
We didn't lose too much around here. I was reading the old newsletters that J.C. Raulston wrote back at the beginning of when we started the Arboretum back from 1984, and I think it was 1984 that year.
84, 85, I think.
They had like a really, really bad freeze that year, and it was exacerbated.
-9 here.
Yeah, and it was exacerbated by the fact that it was like cold, or it was dry leading up to it, so there wasn't really that insulation of the coldness there. So apparently, cold heart, it's just a weird thing with the low temperatures. There's a whole bunch of stuff that influences it. You may have cold temperatures one year and even that don't damage that do damage the plant, but you have colder temperatures that don't the following year. It's just it's a nebulous thing.
In that same line, I've heard from people in Tennessee, they were decimated this past winter when they were just a few degrees cooler than us, I think.
Sure,
and we didn't have anything terribly major here. We had a few things, but
no
nothing.
kidding.
So
absolutely,
Cuba's taken to the ground.
Sure.
Japanese maples. All kinds of stuff.
All kinds of stuff. Okie dokie. So some specific questions about specific bulbs. What about canna bulbs? Can I leave them outside in pots, and dahlia bulbs as well?
I would not leave them outside in a container through the winter. If they're in the ground and they're in the zone 7B south, you're probably pretty darn safe. 7A, you start to get on the edge, and 6B is really iffy. You have to definitely not in a container, but if they were in the ground, you could just heavily mulch them in those colder zones and get away with it. But even here, I would be leery about leaving them out through the winter in a container.
Yeah, definitely. Like part of the fun of growing in a container is the challenge of overwintering it. So like if you don't want that challenge, don't bring that upon yourself.
Put it on a dolly and put it in your garage.
Yeah.
Stick it in a corner somewhere.
Yes.
For sure. Okie dokie. So the salvia cutting.
Yes.
Someone's asking, will that cutting of the more pink salvia root well with the flowers on it, or should they be cut off or take a cutting without flowers?
Oh. Ideally, yes, no flowers. So I haven't prepped these any, but I would go like this. And there's actually a tiny little bud right here. Take that off.
If you had a choice between a stem that had flowers on it that you had to cut off.
Right now I have lots of flowers. They're in full flower. So I'm going to have to go something like this, and I can manipulate that. That should root. Salvias are pretty easy, especially these Salvia garnitica hybrids are very easy for us to root. So, but yes. Ideally, you'd have something that is flowerless. And,
sure.
But they root very easily. It's a lot of the mint family is very forgiving to being flowering material. So you can get away with that.
Mm-hmm. And we had somebody piggybacking off of our comment about overwintering in containers, asking about, can you leave daylilies in pots over winter? Again, like daylilies are hardy here.
I would in Western Pennsylvania, I left them out in a grocery bag, just laid up against the wall, and we got down to -20. And they were fine and dandy.
Well, okay. So, there you go.
They're easier said than done to kill.
The thing about overwintering containers, just to piggyback on something that Tim said, is you want to be sure the container has drainage. You want to be sure it's one that can take a little bit of expansion. You don't want it to be something that's unglazed or just ceramic and unglazed on the inside, because that water is going to get into the pot. And when you get below freezing, water gets big, those molecules get big, and your expensive pot can go into 100 different directions and or crack. So be sure that it's a container that can stay outside.
Resin ones are great.
Resin ones are great. The plastic ones, they're not going to crack.
And they're replaceable too.
And they're absolutely. So, just be careful that you're not going to ruin a really expensive container.
Okie dokie. So Carolyn's asking, should I trim off the dried brown stems of my Bartzella peony? If it rains in water, gets in the stems, is that a hazard?
I just cut back some peonies of the Ito peonies the other day. They are perfectly fine and dandy. Peonies, they like it cold.
Yeah.
They are not going to be phased by our winters. They actually like our winters to be about 10 to 15 degrees colder, I think, to be truly happy.
Yeah.
So they'd rather be 15 to 20 degrees below zero in the winter than ours when we've been having winters that are 15 to 20 degrees.
And the tree peonies and the hybrids are super tough plants in the garden. Really, really forgiving.
So yeah, go ahead, cut them back. It won't hurt.
Alrighty. So Marilyn's asking, can purple fountain grass be wintered over in any manner? I have a 3-season porch that gets some winter sun and doesn't get below freezing. Would that work?
I've never succeeded, but I've never tried actually overwintering
The bigger ones will?
Yeah, the purpureum types will, but I've never had
I've never had success with
citatums.
No, I've never had, and for those were so easy to get.
Yes.
It didn't really matter. I almost treated those as annuals.
Yes.
When I would change beds out, they would come out too, because by this time of the year, the tips of them are the leaves are nasty looking. The seed heads are starting to blow around. I would just treat them like annuals.
Yeah, that's exactly what I would do.
Yeah.
So, and you'll get a nice fresh thing. I mean, you can get a small plug in the spring and you will have a very nice plant by a month or so later.
Yep.
So it's like, they just like the heat.
Okay, so from a perspective of overwintering, is a raised bed considered a container?
I mean, there's going to be some temperature concerns, but depending how deep your soil horizon is, depending on what the raised bed is made out of, and how high it is, if you're not sure and there's tender things in there, take them out, put them in something to overwinter, and stick them in a corner of your garage or someplace to get them through. If it's a raised bed, low like these walls here, I don't think that's going to be a problem. You're close enough to the ground, and that inversion from a temperature standpoint, I think things will be okay. If they're the really tall ones,
if it were thin too.
Yeah, I would. If you're not sure, take them out and save your plants so that you've got them for the spring.
Yeah, for sure. He says it's about a foot in depth, and so I would think that's basically just like a mound.
Yeah, that's just a little bump in the lawn.
For sure.
Same goes for window boxes or anything like that. There's not a lot of...
And the air goes the whole way around those too.
Yeah, that's the other part. Yep.
Okie dokie. So Nancy is thinking about tossing out the turf, and she's looking at tilling up where her lawn was, and she's asking, is tilling soil to make a garden bed where I previously had lawn a good option or not?
It depends on a couple things. You don't want to till up tree roots. So if that lawn extends into the drip line of a tree, you could cause damage to the trees. If it's just, your lawn and there aren't those areas where roots come in, I would herbicide the turf first, because you could just be cultivating, especially if it's Bermuda or a warm season. And if you're tilling up those little tiny pieces, you're basically seeding, and that's going to go in your soil and it's going to cause a nightmare. Right now is a good time to treat with herbicide, because a lot of plants are building up their root systems for the winter. So that herbicide is going to go into the root system relatively quickly. So I would nuke the turf first. You might need to do it a couple times, and then you can till. Throw some mulch down to keep weeds from coming back in. And when you're planting, you've already got that mulch ready, and you can pull that around your plants as well.
Would there be any issues if they use chemicals on the lawn?
If
in the past,
read the labels on the pesticide containers that you're using. If it's just like a straight Roundup thing, that should be fine. If you get a Roundup with the extended kill,
or I'm thinking like a pre-emergent that they may have been putting on the long term.
Right. If you get a Roundup with a broadleaf weed in it, they even make them with pre-emergence in it, that changes the game completely. That stuff's going to stay in the soil a little bit longer. You might have to wait several weeks for that stuff to kind of to break down. Roundup's not going to linger in the soil. It's going to be in the plant tissue, and it's going to disseminate rather quickly. Just be careful which one you use. There's a whole lot of them in the market right now.
Okay, so Alden's asking, is aromatic aster, which is Symphiatricum oblongifolium, hardy enough to overwinter in a container? And he says his container is plastic and it has drainage.
How big is the container?
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And where is he located? If he's here and say it's a gallon or bigger, I think he's fine and dandy.
Okay.
But if he's in like a little quart pot,
yeah,
it might have an issue.
Sure.
But that's a really good hardy native aster in reality. So we have it right out here actually. So
yeah, awesome. Okay, so Barbara says she's trying tillage radishes this fall. Is it a good thing to do in raised beds / terraces to improve their clayey soil?
I have zero experience with tillage radishes. I like to eat them, not plant them. So I'm a bit out of my...
I don't know 100%, but I would say that it can't hurt.
Yeah. And
organic matter, if nothing else.
Organic matter, if nothing else. And radishes are kind of nice. The greens are pretty. They come up pretty quickly. They can take a little bit of the cool temperatures, I think. I would say try them and report back to us and tell us what we're missing.
Absolutely. And Alden Symphyiotricum is in a 2 or 3 gallon pot in Charlotte, so he'll be definitely dandy. Okie dokie. Nancy's asking specifically which herbicide?
We don't like to promote them,
Yeah.
Because we don't want to be on the hook if something goes amiss.
For sure.
So I would go to a garden center and talk to folks at the garden center about the best ones to use. Don't just go to your big box or wherever and just pick something out of the menagerie of ones that are there. Go to your local garden center and ask them, or look at some of our extension publications. There are so many of those on the website, and I'm sure there's one that kind of talks about, from a generic standpoint, the active ingredient that you want to use. And that said, be careful of some of the so-called organic ones too, because a lot of those are more toxic than the stuff that you buy off the shelf.
Alrighty, and Miriam raises an interesting point. Why not cover prospective flower bed areas with cardboard? And there's no poisons there. And one thing I would like to point out about doing that very thing is that sometimes cardboard has like a waxy coating on it. And if you put cardboard with a waxy coating on it to cover your beds, then that's just going to take forever to break down, and it's also going to prevent water from getting into the soil. It's just not going to break down. It's going to deprive the soil of your health.
I don't know if it'll even kill the warm season grasses either, though,
won't,
because
honestly.
they go down deep.
The thing about cardboard, the thing about newspaper, the thing about the so-called weed fabrics. We did a trial in my previous job on the weed fabrics. A lot of them don't let all the moisture go through. All of them don't let those organic materials as they break down go through. It stays on the top, and you're just building a whole nother horizon with that organic matter for weed seeds to germinate. And then you're gonna have weeds on top and weeds underneath. And it takes a while for those weeds to get killed. It's not completely dark either. We did some trials with plastic to kill weeds, and it wasn't as effective as registered herbicides. I don't think that's the way to go in this situation.
Sure. Yeah, and registered herbicides, as long as you're reading the label and using everything appropriately, it's safe.
Yeah, all things in moderation. It's really important to pay attention to what you're purchasing.
Okay. And Diane is asking, when should an outdoor bog be refreshed? I imagine from a soil perspective.
That I don't even know.
We forgot to invite our bog expert.
Yeah,
honestly.
I would say it's like any garden. There's lots of things, and one that's on my mind right now is our rose garden. It needs a little refresh with some more roses and some other things. It's all about your aesthetic and your threshold, your tolerance for how it looks. If you've got room for more plants and things that are going to have enough space to kind of grow and grow together, go for it. For me, I say this at every chance I get: winter, spring, summer, fall interest. Use that as an ingredient to decide, is that bog garden looking good at all those times of the year, or is it completely vacant and devoid of life and interest in that early time of the year?
I would also wonder, what are they planting in? Are they doing insectivores, or are they doing something that wants a higher nutrient value? The insectivores could care less if there's good soil in there.
Yeah.
But if it's like primula bog, which we can't really do well here, like with primula, the candelabra type primulas, they're going to want a much more nutrient-rich soil, maybe ligularias and things like that. But and they might need to be refreshed a little bit, but. Yeah, and it might just take into account the settling of the soil too.
Right.
If you're doing a insectivore bog, you're going to use primarily peat and or sand, and those are pretty stable. They don't break down a whole lot. So,
Sure. And while we're on the topic of substrates for such places, Marilyn says that you mentioned permatil fines in the soil here.
Yep.
She's asking what's the difference between that and regular permatil, and where would you get permatil fines?
permatil fines are more like sand type.
Permatil is a bigger substrate.
It's more small gravel. I don't have any in here.
Yeah, it's more.
It's what we use for mulch here, actually.
The fines are the particles when they're washing it and filtering and screening it. That's a whole nother level, and that almost acts like sand. It's good to hold on to organic matter. If you use biochar, it's something that works good with biochar, but it's a much finer substrate than just straight permatil. And I'm not sure where.
Yeah, I don't know where you get the fines.
No. I would say the same place you get permatil. We get things in bigger sources, and I've only been to 2 garden centers since I've been here, but I would think that maybe I don't know if they sell that stuff by the bag.
They do the coarse material, and they sell it as vol block pretty often.
Yeah.
And you can get that, but I don't know if you can get the fines.
I don't know.
Yeah, it might have to go. It'd be more in bulk, I would think.
Okie dokie. So Patricia's asking how to get rid of ants in containers before you bring your containers inside to overwinter.
Let me know.
Yeah, short of an insecticide, there really isn't a good way. And you're going to have to use an insecticide. You can't use a bait. You're going to have to use something that you flush the pot with, unfortunately. But that is a bad problem right now. You can try to repot it, but that's going to be precarious, and you're probably, depending on what kind of ants they are, you don't want to do that if they're fire ants. You're going to get eaten absolutely alive. But and if it's something that you can part with, throw it away.
Sure. When I was working as an intern in the nursery management program here, we used ant baits, which were just poison baits, and you just sprinkled it around where the ants were, and they come out, they get the bait, they bring it inside. Yep. So like that may be an option for you, rather than like the dusts that dry them out or whatever, like a bait that they will go out and get and bring inside. And
either way, there's going to be something toxic involved.
Yeah, for sure.
The baits are a little bit safer because they're some of them are IGRs, insect growth regulators, and they affect how they molt. With the baits, you don't want to put them on the mound itself, because all those worker ants that protect the nest are going to see that as something invading it. They're going to take that and they're going to move it away. You have to sprinkle around the nest so that they walk through it and say, oh, there's something here to eat. They pick it up and they take it in the nest and store it and feed it to all their neighbors and their kinfolk.
And goodness gracious, we've come to like 3 different stopping points, but the questions just keep coming hot and heavy. So Shirley's asked, she says that she had 3 Bradford pear trees removed, and what would you suggest to put in their place?
Well, that's a whole nother talk. I mean, really, it depends on what you want. Depends on the space that you have.
Yeah.
Small tree, flowering tree, big tree, conifer. The world is your oyster. It really depends on your site. If it's under power lines, you want something that's not going to grow into the power lines. Full sun, shade, the type of soil that you have. It's all those factors are going to determine what you want to do next. But kudos for cutting down your pears. At least that's a good start.
Yeah. And how exciting is it to have the opportunity to plant 3 new trees?
Exactly.
Like, whatever you want.
Or more. You can start. It doesn't have to be trees. You can make a new bed.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The world is your oyster, like Greg said. Absolutely. Okie dokie. Marilyn noticed a passiflora vine across the great lawn by the brick sidewalk that is taking over some other neighbors. How/when do you control that?
I did pull it back, so I know which one she's talking about. There's a beautiful seedling that popped up. It's a pure white passiflora incarnata, and I love them, but I hate them. And I did pull it back off the Lespedesia that it was eating up. I used Roundup on it earlier in the summer, and at least kept it from going another 8 to 10 feet on either side. So it's just when
it's flowering, it's great.
It's
and
great.
And that one's
and
in a spot that we can kind of let it
right
run
now. I don't have anything there. the determining factor will be when I have something, when I get around to renovating that area, I'll have to make some decisions. I mean, passion flowers are great because they are host plants for Gulf fritillaries as well. So you hate to do too much with that, but I mean, that one is an exquisitely pure white form, and you don't see that. So, and they're a pain to control. Across from where that one is growing, in the perennial border, I actually planted one called Inspiration last year. I put it into a 15-gallon pot and thought, oh, this will contain it. I did that in July last year. It came up 3 feet to the side of it, outside of the pot, not in the pot. It's like, okay.
Jeez.
So you can make plans and they will just throw those out sometimes. So I might have to get a heavier duty pot and try it with this white one and eradicate it and where it's at and put it on a tutor or something. But I just try to do it when I get a chance to. It's like,
there you go.
know, you hate to do it sometimes, but you have to attack it ultimately.
Absolutely. Alrighty, so Nancy's asking if the permatil we use here is the same that they use at the JLBG. Probably pretty much.
It is.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so Diane's asking, can ground up pine cones be worked into a soil as organic matter?
Sure. I don't know how you would grind them up.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the potting mix that we use is pine bark fines, and I'm sure there's pine cones in there somewhere. And that's ground up at a big commercial industrial level. And the reason that that's used as a potting mix is it's super cheap and it wicks moisture really, really quickly, and it's pure organic matter. Watch the pH on that. It's usually a little more acidic. So if you have plants that are more alkaline loving, that's something to consider. But I can almost guarantee that if you are using pine bark fines for potting mix, there's probably pine cones in there somewhere.
Totally. Okie dokie. And Rick has pointed out something very interesting about controlling ants in container. He says, what about submerging the pot into water for a short time or overnight to get rid of the ants?
I remember when, what's the hurricane that hit New Orleans?
Katrina.
Katrina came through. I had friends that lived in Louisiana, and these huge colonies of fire ants were floating around the city, because when they get in that situation, they all clump together, and something about their surface area or the tension of their little tiny bodies, they just kind of float around. And so that they all can breathe, it was just this rotating, horrible globe of little red devils.
I think
floating.
they're from South America, right?
It's an introduced.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're accustomed to the periodic flooding, say, of the Amazon or some of the other tributaries out of there with, you know, the whole forest floods. And so they're perfectly adapted for dealing with
There's
that.
no way you're going to get out of this scenario without getting absolutely eaten alive. Whether you repot it or that's where, you know, I will draw the line if we run into stuff like that here and other places I've worked. When I was in Charlotte, we would have containers get fire ants in them, and they would go into the compost pile or right into the dumpster. I've been bit so much in my life; it's ridiculous. I have bad dreams about them. So it's not a fight that we're going to win, unfortunately. I like the idea of the water, but they're just gonna float, and they're gonna go over the sides of the pots, and they're gonna go all over the place, and probably all over you. And I don't want you to send us pictures of all those little welts all over your
We had these sitting in our house and overnight, and they came to visit us in the bed, right? It was dry there.
Right. Yeah. They're a horrible pest, unfortunately.
Have y'all built up a tolerance to fire ant bites, or is that just me? It doesn't hurt as much anymore. I've gotten attacked by them enough that
I'll do a test if they start. I find if the initial bites aren't bad, it's fine that you get a whole bunch.
We've got people here that are
very
allergic. They don't hurt as much to me, but they sure do itch.
Oh yeah,
and that extends for so much longer. I grew up with them in Alabama as a small person, and they were everywhere. And baptism by fire, learning about them, but. Yeah, they're here to stay, unfortunately.
No kidding. Okie dokie. Well, that looks like that is all the questions we have in
Okay.
the chat for today. So thank you so much, Greg.
Great
and
questions
Tim.
today.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for pulling this presentation together for us. It was very wonderful. Lots of good information here. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this program today. Thank you for all your questions. I'm sure we all learned a lot. So thank you for that. We will be back next week at 3 o'clock. Greg will be doing tool maintenance, which should be fun, educational, and very useful. So make sure you guys are back here next week for that. We'll see y'all then. Y'all take care.